Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about a kind of like a teaching of the Buddha. He spoke about these worldly conditions that are extremes of view that we might take, or let's say that ways that we can do life as well. And John Welwood, a psychologist and Buddhist, some years ago spoke about this thing called spiritual bypassing. So I'm just sort of just give that a bit of a reference as well, and how these are all things that sort of keep us out of connection, essentially, yeah, of how they might limit our ability to come into that heartfulness, the forgiving heart, the connected space, the place where everything goes a bit like, I can just put that burden down. I have to hold on to that so much now. There's a lovely short story from this book, Taking Flight, from Anthony DeMello. It refers to this. He said, a traveler was walking along the road one day when a man on horseback rushed by. There was an evil look in his eyes and blood on his hands. Minutes later, a crowd of riders drew up and wanted to know if the traveler had seen someone with blood on his hands go by. They were in hot pursuit of him. Who is he? The traveler asked. An evildoer, the leader of the crowd said. Oh, are you pursuing him in order to bring him to justice? They said, no, the leader said. We pursue him in order to show him the way. Very sweet story. He's got this little byline that reconciliation alone will save the world, not justice, which is generally another word for revenge. So, punishment. So sometimes when we come to spiritual practice, there's this way that we can use something like this forgiveness meditation to actually bypass the feelings inside. One of the things that we're called to do is sort of balance justice with compassion, that sense of justice, which is like a healthy form of anger, which sometimes we need, with this, well, that healthy form of anger to make sure that what we're forgiven, we're not just like letting ourselves stay in a victim position and allowing it to just happen again and again and again. Makes sense? We're not sort of just going into a place of, oh, it's okay, don't worry, everything's fine. We're allowing this, a healthy sense of, please don't do that. This, no, that's not okay. We have to let that be here. Otherwise, there's that sense of feeling a doormat. Someone can walk over me at any time we like. That's not a great feeling. So bypassing then is this way that we might use spiritual teachings to then bypass the hard work of finding where is that healthy sense of self-esteem inside that will stand up, that will stand for good, whether we're backing up someone else or ourselves. There's sort of this sense of, I've got your back, to friends, also to ourselves as well. If we're in the spiritual bypassing, sometimes we can use that sense of the goal of awakening there is used to justify these things. And John Welwood called it, we're looking for a premature transcendence. a sense of hopping over the messiness there, or just the like, oh, it's not here, the messiness of our relationships. Sometimes was something we were talking about yesterday, where we can then use that to, like, these spiritual truths to speak with kind of like platitudes, these tired phrases that we use in a lazy way to describe something. And platitude is this way of talking with cliches that don't really, we don't feel it inside. It's like a word that's spinning around inside. It's like dismissing the truth through this platitude, through these words. And it's it can be an occupational hazard on this path. So please be aware of that, the sense of lazy speech that uses those things to deny our truth, to deny the difficulty, the messiness of our relationships. It's often kind of like in our friendships that this really shows up, because it's in our friendships and closest relationships that our worst habits will show themselves. Yeah, the closest ones, they're the ones that will trigger these ugly parts of ourselves, unfortunately. It can be the place where we're most challenged, because it's in those places where our deepest wounds will surface, because that's where our deepest vulnerability is. And whether that could be in the way we speak, for instance, we could be speaking harshly in a way that we wouldn't do anywhere else, but we do it to our partner or someone else or a family member. But you'd actually never get away with it in the office, would you? Because someone would pull you up on it. So one of the things that can be kind of hard is that these teachings come from a different culture, come from an Asian culture. Some of you maybe from that, I don't know. But our great challenge, I think, is to make it our own here. Because in reality, it hasn't been here for very long. So we have to look at what are those core teachings that were given there in the, the suttas and the ones that were handed to us from different monastics and lay teachers and things, but really turn a very bright eye towards what are the core things that we need here. What do we need to create a vibrant, loving, healthy, alive spiritual culture? So it's all about how do we handle our emotions? How do we speak with skill in a way that we're aware of how do our words land on others, for instance? Spiritual bypassing can be a classic for sort of dismissing our own needs, because we think, oh, we don't need those because we're heading towards this other big goal, this nibbana, something like that. That's all that matters. Or we dismiss others' needs because of that. But until we can find a sort of inner security, one that's based on our truth, our living truth, our living vitality, it will always be a bit shaky. We'll be on shaky grounds, very shaky grounds. We'll always be a bit disconnected from a sense of aliveness that makes these traditions, that's the reason they've lasted so long, because they're getting into the very core of who we are, that very aliveness, the awakened, liberated heart that can love freely, unhindered, the joy of that. So this is what I want to honor in everyone here, that call, the part of us that knows there's something more to life. Maybe you've experienced it many times. And I encourage you to listen to that deeply. Because whatever you hear or read or listen to online or whatever, none of it will have any effect until you look deeply to see where is it inside of me. So a teacher in America, Reggie Ray, would love to say, the map is not the territory. He's constantly saying this. The words are not the territory. The finger is not the way. We have to find that inside. So in that way, we're all on our own path, but we're also all connected, very much connected. So two things I want to talk about in this way of like, how do we get off the path? One is playing small, right? And one is playing big. Right? Playing small can be a way that possibly when we were young, we learned to be small to fit in to the family. It kept us out of trouble. We learned to appease people. We learned to, our caregivers or the big people in our life, to not get in trouble. The good boy, the nice girl, whatever it is. I just say right from the outset, there's some wonderful qualities in this. Right? So we want to find the healthy expression of that in our lives. So the other way that this might happen is that to fit into the family, again, we might have needed to play big, to be tough. Right? To be tough. Don't cry. You can be stronger than that. Certainly a message I got pretty young. It's one that set me off on my therapy journey, well and truly. And as Terry Rue loves to say, this guy I've been learning from, he's a recovering narcissist. And I can definitely appreciate that, what that might mean. So it's important here that the thing is, it's not so much important to think about whether you play big or you play small. The word is, it's the thing about play is the key. Playing something. Right? So I remember some time ago I heard a kind of life coach sort of person talk about his program. It was about be extraordinary. Be extraordinary. And I'm guessing that that was sort of aimed at people who don't feel that way. They don't feel special. They don't feel enough. They don't feel good enough. They don't feel loved or something like that. So the idea of being extraordinary might be quite appealing possibly there, but it comes with a big trap, right? It comes with a big trap. Because if we're going from that sense of not being that to being something else there, maybe we're jumping over the very thing that we're really desperately looking for. The very thing that we've been craving for so long. And that's simple connection. The simplicity of love, that sense of being enough, of being loved, allowing yourself to love. I love this image that Ted Hargrave talks about. He talks about this thing of these nests, that there's all these interconnected nests. And you think of like the bird has this egg and it's in a nest, and they build the nest in a tree, which is then a nest for that nest, right? And then the earth holds the tree, and that's the nest for that tree. It's holding, right? And then you've got the bigger earth there, which is being held with the sun and the planets and another system, and then the galaxy, the universe. There's interconnectedness. We can think of our lives like that too, rather than the sense of the individual, be the best you can or whatever. But maybe it's actually more about aligning with what's your nest? Where's your nest? Where do you feel called to there to support? What nest do you feel drawn to? It's a beautiful image. And so I feel a sense of, like for me, taking pressure off. It's more like, where do I feel drawn towards where I could rest? Where my whole being can just go, yeah, that feels worthwhile. That feels important. Not that you have to be the leader of a movement like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. Yeah. Because even like those people are all part of a nest, right? Martin Luther King's work has gone on. Like it was part of something bigger than him. Gandhi as well. It was that the liberation of India, and that was only held by millions of other fellow Indians to help him with that. It was the classic moving from me to we thinking. Well, the little bits we do day after day to create the ecosystem that we live in. And the verbal ecosystem. So I often talk about the sense of, sure, you can be angry and have the sense, I just want to tell it like it is, right? Sure, you can do that, right? But don't think there's not consequences for your ecosystem. There is. And if you wall yourself off, the same. Someone can't get to you. It affects the ecosystem as well, the biosphere. So we're moving from, as one teacher said, from ego to eco. The sense of how do we fit in? And how do we enhance that ecology of where we step into life? We're taking the chance to belong, to be part of it, something. Taking that risk. I belong here. As much as anyone else, I belong here. Yeah. So it's not so much about puffing ourselves up, posturing. I'm the greatest. Whatever way it shows itself. Right? Because those postures are always so loaded with cultural baggage about don't be small. Be the biggest and best you. But maybe sometimes you just want to be small. And it's okay to be small. And maybe it's okay to be big too, if you're big. Let yourself be big. And maybe sometimes you just want to move in between those things. If we lock in one or the other, if you're not that, this is where our kind of suffering can come. It's not pretending to be something you're not. Yeah. So what do we got? A couple of minutes to go. Martin Brechtel, this quote, talking about the costs of living in certain ways. He called it the rental rate. The rental rate of connectedness. He said, the rental rate for this gift of being allowed to flourish and reside in this continuum within the rest of the world is that we do everything possible to be indigenously beautiful, promising that we make ourselves spiritually full and delicious so as to feed the next ones to appear in the ongoing river on the occasion of our passing. Grand, beautiful words, huh? Sweet. Very sweet. So maybe you're destined to talk in front of 100,000 people. Maybe 20 is as far as it goes. But every bit's important. Every bit's important. Because your voice, don't underestimate the power of your voice to make a difference for someone. I remember in India, where I was helping to manage some retreats there before I was teaching, but often sort of dealing with people's practical things before and after a retreat. I remember one day I just said a few words to someone about something about, I can't remember what it was. And she emailed me 10 years later and told me how important that was. You just don't know. You just don't know what's possible by the simple, just letting your kindness be there. And so sweet to have that message on Facebook. Yeah. So I think, it's okay to be extraordinary. It's okay to be ordinary. Yeah. Because the ordinary contains this body here. Yeah. Which has some very ordinary things in it. Our bowel movements, saliva, snot, right? Very ordinary, everyday things. We don't allow space for those. What are we pretending? Like we're not mortal? Everyday things, our need for love, our need for community. What's most important in your biosphere? What do you want to bring into it? What do you want to nourish and nurture in that? In your garden? Yeah. I'll close with a little quote from a Dzogchen master who died a little while ago. He's talking about this thing, the difference between sort of transcendence, this call for transcendence, which the teachings offer, and everyday attachment to family, to friends, to community. Chagdud Tuku, can't say that word, Chagdud. Tibetan Lama. So he's speaking about the nest that he was in. He said, people often ask me, do lamas, these Tibetan monks, have attachments? He said, I don't know how other lamas might answer this, but I must say, yes, I do. I recognize that my students, my family, my country have no inherent reality. They're not permanent. They're not locked in place. They come into being. They leave. He's talking here about absolute truth. And he said, yet I remain deeply attached to them. So talking about relative truth, deep caring, deep caring. And he said, I recognize also that my attachment has no inherent reality. He's really worked through this. He said, but I cannot deny the experience of it. I cannot deny that attachment. I cannot deny the experience of it. And he ended by saying, so still knowing the empty nature of attachment, the empty nature of things in life, that they don't have a permanent reality, but they exist. So knowing this empty nature, I know my motivation to benefit all beings must supersede that emptiness. Really interesting way to look at it, huh? If we deny our love and care, who are we? But knowing, as Ram Dass would say, knowing that it's all impermanent, knowing that it's a flowing show, this life, passing show. Real freedom comes from committing to care as deeply as you possibly can, to engaging with the fullness of your being in life. And this is where our real freedom comes. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. And let's finish up there. Thanks, heart.